Before we begin, close your eyes for a moment and picture a wide stretch of rice fields in the early morning. The air is cool, the mist still clinging to the ground, and under the shade of an old mango tree, an elderly farmer readies himself for another day's work. This is Mang Elias, a man of the land, a man of few words. To his two sons, he has always been steady but distant. Here in Barrio San Isidro, love isn't often spoken. It's shown in calloused hands, in the weight a father carries alone, in sacrifices no one notices until years later. What you're about to hear is a story of two brothers, one steady, one restless, and a father whose truest gift was never written in his will. Because not all inheritances are found in papers or property. Some are hidden deep, waiting for the right hands to uncover them. This is beneath the mango tree, a father's true inheritance. Chapter 1. The Land and Its Keeper. The light came first, a golden spear piercing the eastern sky above Barrio San Isidro, the small farming village where his father and grandfather had worked before him, long before the sun itself appeared. In this sacred hour between night and day, the rice fields lay like mirrors reflecting heaven, their surfaces broken only by the gentle movements of sleeping carabaos and the careful steps of early fishermen along the irrigation channels that had sustained this farming community for generations. Mang Elias was already awake in his small nipa palm hut, following the farmer's discipline that had ruled his life for 40 years. Sleep had become a fickle visitor in recent years, leaving him more time for the careful work that occupied his evening hours. His weathered hands moved restlessly as he lay on his sleeping mat, mind turning to the delicate task that had kept him busy in the quiet hours before dawn. He glanced toward the corner where his few possessions were kept alongside his secret project, then rose slowly, joints protesting against the morning dampness. His bones protested as he rose from the woven bannig sleeping mat, joints grinding like old wood in the morning humidity. He chewed a betel nut slowly, the traditional morning ritual his father had taught him, letting its bitter juice stain his few remaining teeth red, then wrapped his faded malong wraparound cloth around his waist. Through the gaps in the nipa palm roof, stars faded like distant memories of his youth when the world seemed full of endless possibility. The morning air carried the symphony of awakening San Isidro, roosters calling across the village in ancient territorial challenge, the soft lowing of carabaos stirring in their muddy wallows, the whispered prayers of old women beginning their day with gratitude to the Almighty. Wood smoke began to curl from cooking fires, carrying promises of steaming rice and salted fish that would fuel another day's honest labor. Mang Elias limped toward the small Linta shelter where Cal waited patiently, his movements careful and measured like those of a man who understood that his body was no longer young. The carabao's massive head turned at his approach, dark eyes regarding him with the patience that had sustained their partnership for 8 faithful years. Steam rose from the animal's nostrils in the cool air, and his tail flicked once in morning greeting, a ritual as dependable as sunrise. "Good morning to you, Calais," Mang Elias murmured, his voice carrying the particular gentleness he reserved for this great beast who had never judged him, never demanded words he couldn't give. The carabao responded with a soft rumble deep in his chest, lowering his massive head to accept the rough caress of weathered hands that had learned to show affection more easily to animals than to his own sons. "How are you feeling this morning, my old companion?" Mang Elias asked, running his fingers along the animal's damp flank, feeling the coarse hair and solid muscle beneath. "Another day of good work ahead for us both, yes. As my father taught me, and his father before him." Cal was no longer young, but then, neither was his master. Gray touched the carabao's muzzle now, and his horns had yellowed with age like old ivory. His gait had slowed from the eager strength of his youth to something more measured, more deliberate. But he remained steady, a constancy that Mang Elias had come to depend upon more than he cared to admit, especially as his own strength began its slow retreat. The rice paddies stretched before them like a green sea, terraced fields that had been carved from these hillsides by his grandfather's grandfather, when the Spanish still ruled these islands. Don Fernando's land, yes, but tended by generations of crews' hands under the old tenant system that bound families to the soil through both necessity and tradition. The arrangement was as ancient as memory, half the harvest for the landowner after expenses, half for the tenant who provided the sweat and skill and daily devotion. In good years, it fed the family with some left over for small luxuries. In lean years, it meant tightening belts and borrowing rice against the next season's uncertain hope. Mang Elias paused at the edge of his assigned plot, the smallest of Don Fernando's parcels, but rich with the accumulated wisdom of decades. A man's hands tell his story, and these fields told of 3 generations of careful attention. The previous day's furrows stretched across half the field in neat, parallel lines, evidence of work interrupted by the coughing fit that had left him gasping and tasting the metallic tang of blood. Today, God willing, he would finish preparing the soil. Tomorrow, if his strength held, he would begin the delicate work of transplanting seedlings with the same care his father had shown him. He reached for the wooden plow, its handle worn smooth by 3 generations of hands, his grandfather's, his father's, now his own. Soon perhaps Nando's. The thought brought both comfort and concern as he positioned the implement behind Calais with movements practiced over 4 decades. As he bent to secure the harness, a familiar pain shot through his lower back like lightning from heaven itself, momentarily whitening his vision. He leaned against the carabao's solid flank until the spasm passed, drawing strength from the animal's patient warmth. "Just a reminder from these old bones, my faithful friend," he muttered, forcing lightness into his voice, though both man and beast understood the deeper truth. "Nothing we two can't handle together, no problem." But both knew better. Each season the pain grew sharper, the recovery slower. Each morning brought fresh evidence of time's relentless accounting, the cough that interrupted his sleep, the tremor in his hands that made his evening needlework a challenge requiring iron will and perfect concentration. The thought of his secret work brought his sons to mind, as it always did. Ramon, his eldest at 32, would still be sleeping somewhere, perhaps in the back room of Ca Berto's sari-sari store, the small neighborhood shop that served as the barrio's social center, his head heavy with tuba palm wine and the easy camaraderie of men who had nowhere pressing to be. Ramon with his quick laugh and silver tongue, who could charm mangoes from trees but couldn't be trusted with anything that truly mattered. Ramon who carried Lucia's restless spirit, her beautiful discontent with the boundaries of their small world, her hunger for something beyond the endless cycle of planting and harvest. And Nando, 27 now, probably already awake in his own small hut, preparing simple breakfast for Clara and the children before making the walk across the paddies to help his aging father. Nando, who had inherited Rose's steady heart and quiet strength, her ability to find contentment in simple things done well. Nando, who worked with the persistence of water wearing away stone, never complaining, never questioning, never asking for the acknowledgement he deserved, but that his father struggled to give. The comparison twisted something in Mang Elias' chest that had nothing to do with his illness. How did a man explain that love could be strangled by grief? That sometimes a son's very existence was both precious blessing an unbearable reminder. Rosa had died bringing Nando into this world, her life bleeding away in the same room where Mang Elias now spent sleepless nights, wrestling with thoughts too heavy for words and working by lamplight on the only gift he knew how to give. He secured Callie's harness with practiced movements, checking the worn leather straps for signs of further weakening. Like everything else in his life, the harness was held together through careful maintenance and stubborn will. He couldn't afford replacement. Every peso mattered now, each centavo carefully hoarded for the greater purpose that occupied his evening hours. The sun emerged fully now, burning away the morning mist and warming the air with its blessing. Mang Elias straightened his back as much as pain allowed, and guided Callie forward with a gentle click of his tongue. The plow bit into the earth, turning dark soil to sunlight in a ritual as old as agriculture itself, as sacred as any prayer offered in church. Row by row, they moved across the field in the ancient dance of partnership. The rhythm settled into Mang Elias' bones, step, pause, turn, step again, the meditation of honest work. His worn salakot hat, rewoven countless times over the years in the same pattern Rosa had taught him, shielded his eyes from the climbing sun. Sweat darkened his faded shirt as they worked, but there was prayer in the labor, blessing in the steady turning of earth that would soon nurture new life. By mid-morning, when heat began to shimmer above the paddies like dancing spirits, and even the birds sought shade, a familiar figure appeared along the narrow dike that separated the fields. Nando, carrying a bamboo container of water and a small package wrapped in banana leaves, breakfast sent by Clara, whose care extended even to the father-in-law who had never learned to express gratitude in the words it deserved. Mang Elias straightened slowly, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a mud-stained hand. He watched his son approach with the measured gait of a man already seasoned by decades of field work, though Nando was still young enough to believe his strength would last forever. In his son's steady approach, Mang Elias saw echoes of his own younger self, full of purpose and unaware that the body was merely borrowed, not owned. "Father," Nando called as he drew closer, raising his hand in respectful greeting. At 27, he was already taking on the solid build that had marked the crew's men for generations, broad shoulders capable of bearing any weight life might place upon them, hands that could be gentle with seedlings or powerful on a plow handle. Only his eyes were different from his father's, dark and watchful where Mang Elias had faded to the color of weak tea, but carrying that same careful attention to the world around him. "Father, you should rest a bit," Nando said, offering the container of cool water. "Clara sent breakfast for you." Mang Elias accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply before taking the banana leaf package that rustled with promise. Inside was rice mixed with small dried fish and a precious salted egg, more than he would have prepared for himself, reflecting Clara's generous spirit and perhaps her growing worry about his declining appetite. "Your wife, she worries too much for this old man, my son," he said, the paternal warmth slipping into his voice as hunger reminded him how little he'd eaten the night before, busy with his careful evening work that no one else could know about yet. Nando squatted beside him in the shade of an ancient mango tree, surveying the morning's progress with the eye of someone who understood good work when he saw it. The neat furrows stretched across more than half the field, impressive work for a man whose body was clearly failing him, though Nando was too respectful to comment directly on his father's obvious struggle. "You started very early this morning, father," Nando observed, noting the substantial progress already made. It wasn't quite a question, but Mang Elias felt compelled to answer anyway. "These days, sleep is not coming easy for me. Better I should work than just lie there thinking too much about things that cannot be changed." A pause stretched between them, filled with the drone of insects and the distant calls of farmers in neighboring fields beginning their own morning labor. This was their pattern, approach and retreat, like careful dancers testing each other's steps. With Ramon, conversation flowed easily, even when it carried criticism or correction. But with Nando, there was always this invisible wall, built from grief and misunderstanding, mortared with 27 years of words neither had learned to speak. "Let me take the plow now, father," Nando said after finishing his careful assessment of the field. "This heat is getting stronger, and you should rest." Mang Elias wanted to refuse. Pride demanded he finish what he had begun, especially in front of the son who had inherited Rose's work ethic along with her gentle eyes. But his back throbbed in warning, and wisdom born of long experience told him that pushing further might mean days of immobility, time he couldn't spare with so much important work still left undone. "Just until this heat passes, my son," he conceded, making it sound like practical strategy rather than surrender to age and illness. From the mango tree's generous shade, Mang Elias watched his younger son work. Nando's movements were efficient, his communication with Cal as natural as breathing. The Carabao responded to him with the same trust he showed Mang Elias, perhaps even more readily, as if sensing the younger man's steadier energy and patient understanding. There was rightness in the sight that eased something in Mang Elias' chest. This was the way of things in this life, father to son, season to season, knowledge passing like precious seedlings from one generation's hands to the next. The land remembers those who care for it, and Nando understood this truth in his bones, this sacred connection between man and soil and beast. Ramon, for all his charm and quick wit, remained a visitor to this world of patient cultivation. The cough seized him suddenly, violent spasms that seemed to tear at his chest from within like claws seeking escape. Mang Elias pressed his palm against his ribs, feeling the rattle deep in his lungs that had begun as a minor irritation 3 months ago, but now awakened him at night, leaving him gasping and tasting the copper of his own mortality. When the fit subsided, he wiped his mouth discreetly with his handkerchief. A smear of red stained the faded cloth, brighter than it had been yesterday, more abundant than the week before. He folded the handkerchief quickly, hiding the evidence before Nando could see and worry about things that couldn't be helped. "Father, are you okay?" Nando's voice broke through his troubled thoughts. His son stood before him, concern etching lines around his young eyes. When had he stopped working? How long had he been lost in contemplation of his own ending? "Just taking this shade's blessing for a moment, son," Mang Elias replied gruffly, forcing himself to straighten, to hide the tremor in his hands that seemed to grow stronger each day. "This mango tree, she gives us good fruit and even better shade. Like a generous woman in this life, no. Always giving without counting the cost to herself." The comparison was clumsy, but it was the kind of gentle humor Ramon would have appreciated and expanded upon with one of his stories. Nando's face remained serious, unsmiling, another small failure in their endless dance of misunderstanding. "The heat is getting stronger," Nando said carefully. "I can finish the field." Mang Elias shook his head, taking the lead rope from his son's hands with the quiet authority that brooked no argument, even from a grown man with children of his own. "Your children need their father more than these furrows need finishing today, son. Maybe you should check the irrigation channels in the eastern corner. It was looking dry yesterday. Make sure the water flows where it should, as it must." Nando studied him for a moment too long, seeing too much with those careful eyes he'd inherited from his mother. But he only nodded, handing over the rope with respect for his father's wishes. "All right, father," he agreed. "Clara's expecting me for lunch anyway." As Nando moved away to inspect the water flow, Mang Elias returned to Cal, and the plow with movements that cost him more effort than he wanted to admit. The Carabao regarded him with liquid brown eyes that seemed to hold understanding beyond mere animal instinct. In those patient eyes, Mang Elias read loyalty, endurance, and something that might have been sympathy for an old man's struggle against time's inexorable advance. "Not much longer for either of us in this world, my faithful friend," he murmured, patting the beast's broad forehead with the affection he struggled to show his own sons. "But we finish what we start, yes. Just as my father taught me, and his father before him. This is the way of men who work the land with respect." Callie's ears flicked in response, and together they returned to the ancient rhythm of cultivation. One row at a time, one day at a time, writing their brief story on the enduring page of land that would outlast both man and beast, that would remember their care long after they had returned to dust. Above them, the sun traced its familiar arc across a sky vast enough to hold all their small griefs and smaller hopes. In the distance, smoke rose from cooking fires as the women of San Isidro prepared the midday meal that would fuel the afternoon's work. Children's voices carried on the warm breeze, Alina and Tonio among them, representing the future these fields would feed long after today's laborers had finished their earthly work. The pattern would continue, God willing. Sons would inherit their father's knowledge, daughters would marry and tend their own family's needs, grandchildren would learn the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of harvest well earned. And somewhere in that continuation, Mang Elias' hopes would unfold, his love finally understood in the only language he had ever mastered, the quiet eloquence of preparation, provision, and sacrifice disguised as simple daily duty. "Another day of honest work, Cal," he said as they reached the end of a furrow and turned for the next pass. "Another day, another step in the dance that has sustained our people for generations beyond counting." The Carabao snorted softly in agreement, and together they continued their labor beneath the benevolent gaze of mountains that had watched over this valley since time began, patient witnesses to the small but essential dramas of men who found their meaning in the turning of earth and the promise of tomorrow's harvest, in the hope that good children are a parent's greatest crop.